Hi everyone, it has been a good few years since I filmed my own video talking about cybersecurity stuff, and I've been meaning to catch up and do some more for a while. I thought what better time to do one than in light of the biggest ever known data breach, which is Yahoo's 1 billion records compromised in 2013, which we found out about last night. This is following news, of course, that Yahoo were breached in 2014 and 500 million accounts were compromised then. We found out about that in September. And at the same time as this piece of news last night about the 1 billion user accounts being compromised, Yahoo also disclosed that their forensic investigators have discovered that attackers apparently have accessed Yahoo's or had accessed Yahoo's code and were forging cookies so they could replicate the cookies, make themselves look like legitimate users and access their data. So that's aside to whether they could, crack the passwords that were breached, etc. Apparently all of this has come to light because of the Verizon acquisition. So Verizon are meant to be acquiring Yahoo after the news in September that 500 million accounts were breached in 2014 and Yahoo had only just discovered it. Verizon, I think, have been considering their position and have said it could lead to a material change in the contract. So Yahoo had to do more investigations, and it's in doing more investigations that they found out about these other issues. The 1 billion user accounts compromised, the 500 million, the cookies, it all seems to be separate things, but of course there could be a crossover, and some of the accounts in the 500 million may have also been compromised in the 1 billion. We don't know yet. 1 billion, the biggest known data breach is what is being said, and I want to just unpick that phrase a little bit, that label a little bit. In terms of records, in terms of number of user accounts, 1 billion is huge. It is 1/7 of the world, which is behind me. So that's a large number of user accounts. If it was people, it would be 1/7 of the world. Of course, it's not going to be people. It's not going to be 1 billion people. With those accounts, it will be throwaway accounts. It will be shared accounts. It will be scammers accounts. So yeah, I don't think it's 1 billion people, but it is still a lot. It is the biggest known data breach in terms of records. What do I mean by that? I mean, we don't know what we don't know. Until yesterday, we thought the biggest known data breach was also Yahoo, but that it was 500 million. Who knows what we're going to find out tonight or tomorrow or next week or next year. 2016 has kind of been the year of historic data breaches coming to light. As well as Yahoo, there's been LinkedIn and MySpace and probably others that I can't think of off the top of my head. So maybe we'll find out more before 2016 closes. I'm sure there will be more to discover in 2017. And this is always the way with cybersecurity. We don't know what we don't know. Yahoo didn't know it had been attacked, let alone having disclosed the information. So there could be many companies out there that just don't know they've had a huge breach, and there could be others that know but haven't disclosed it. So that's what we're dealing with here. Biggest, it is known as the biggest data breach, biggest known data breach, and of course that word is loaded, and it depends how you measure scale. So if we're looking at the number of accounts, then absolutely it's the biggest known one. 1 billion user accounts, a huge number. If we're looking at impact, then that's a bit more difficult to say. We have had the huge breach of Ashley Madison, and Ashley Madison, as you probably know, extramarital affairs website, so website for people who are married and want to have affairs. So that data breach exposed a lot of personal sensitive information. It will have had an impact on people's home lives, marriages, relationships with children, family, wider family. It may have had a professional impact on some people. We know that it led to at least one suicide, so it's had some devastating effects. There was also the breach of the Office of Personnel Management in the United States, in which fingerprint data was stolen. And this is the thing with biometrics, like, it all sounds great, do away with passwords, but you can replace a password, you can't replace your fingers or your eyeballs or your voice or whatever. And this fingerprint data is related to people working for the United States government, some of whom are obviously in very sensitive jobs, high levels of clearance. So there's some issues there around their safety and around national security of the United States. So some big impact breaches. Yahoo, we don't necessarily know, may never know the impact of the Yahoo breach. Having your email account breached, compromised, is potentially really damaging. People store a lot of information on email, a lot of personal information, a lot of sensitive information, a lot of financial information. It kind of, if your email account is compromised, it can provide access essentially to your whole life, or to large parts of your life. As Quentin Taylor pointed out, as part of a discussion we were having on Twitter, one example of this has been like house scam stuff that seems to have increased in the last year or so. So there was one example that Quentin pointed to in January of this year. A news story came out about a couple in the UK who were buying a house, and they were communicating with their solicitor via email, as you do when you're buying a house. They got an email that they thought was from their solicitor. It looked like it came from their solicitor, and it was asking them to transfer the money for the deposit. This was £45,000, which of course they followed the instructions, because why wouldn't they? They thought the communication was from their solicitor. They wanted to buy the house. So they transferred the money, and then afterwards it became apparent that the money didn't go to the solicitor. It went to an attacker who had compromised like their account. I'm not sure if it was their email account or the solicitor's email account. I don't know if they ever found that out. But the money went to the attacker. It did not go to the solicitors. The couple lost it. They didn't get the house. They lost their life savings. This obviously has hugely devastating effects, and liability can be tricky, unless it could be proven that it was the solicitor's email network that was compromised. Then who's liable for that? Who's responsible for that? Who pays out for that? In this case, the couple lost the money. So that obviously has a big impact on their lives, on their future, and of course, emotionally and psychologically, to go through something like that can be really difficult and really damaging for some people. So Yahoo could have a huge impact on lots of people's lives. It could have already had an impact that we don't know about, that we haven't been able to link to Yahoo. So it's going to be really interesting to see if more comes out around that. When you're judging impact, there's of course the impact on people, on the users, so-called users, service users. There's the impact on the company itself. So there could be a big impact there in terms of this Verizon acquisition. If Verizon knock money off the price that they're paying, or if they back out of the acquisition, it'll be very interesting to see what that happens, but there could be a really big impact on Yahoo. And impact partly depends on who is behind the attack and what they're using the information for. Yahoo have said that this is a state-sponsored attack. They haven't said they suspect it, they've said it is. So that's quite interesting. We will see. That hasn't been verified by anyone else. We don't know on what basis they are saying that. So we'll see if anything further comes out, or if there can be any other verification of that claim. We may never know. Some people in the cybersecurity industry are skeptical of this claim. And they're skeptical, it seems, for two reasons. One being they question whether state-sponsored attackers have the motive to go after something like Yahoo email accounts. And people in the industry are also saying like it's very convenient to blame it on state-sponsored attackers because that implies it's an advanced, persistent, sophisticated threat at which lots of time and money and resource has been thrown at it. You know, very determined attackers who will have the money and the determination to really go at it. And so people are kind of saying it seems more likely that it would be financial, organised financial gangs, organised financial crime, and they're saying, or it could, you know, be like a lone attacker who's just like testing out their skills, like the Talk incident. But blaming it on those things, it sounds like you haven't been as careful in your defences. Whereas if you say like, oh, it was state-sponsored, then that implies that there wasn't anything more you could do. You know, you had a really tough adversary, and so it potentially elicits more sympathy for Yahoo. That's what the skeptics are saying. In terms of whether it is state-sponsored, the motivation there, the only motivation I can see for state-sponsored attackers, and this is purely speculation, but I would say they're not going after like mass data, they're not interested in the data of like you or I so much. It would be that they were targeting key individuals, probably that they were using Yahoo. That's the only thing that I can think of that would motivate a state-sponsored attacker to target Yahoo email accounts. It'll be really interesting to see if any more comes out on that, if there is any more attribution, if there's any more information behind the attribution, but I guess it's a watch this space kind of thing. If you're worried about either the Yahoo attack or just the security of email in general, then there's stuff that you can do and that you should be encouraging other people who are worried to do. Of course, the key first thing is to change passwords. If you're still using a Yahoo account and you're still using the same password from a few years ago, you should change that. Change it to something very different to what you've been using. Change it to something unique, uncomplicated. You might want to write your passwords down because you should be using different passwords everywhere and they should be complicated. So you might want to write them down and lock them, for example, in a drawer or in your safe. I'd say that's more suitable to do at home than with your work accounts, because if the worst thing that can happen, you know, at home is that your family, your kids, your spouse, your housemates, whoever, if they get access to your accounts, just have a think, like, that's the worst thing that could happen. How bad would that be? What would be the impact of that? And if you kind of like, oh, I don't mind, it wouldn't be the end of the world, then that might be the best route forward, might be the best way for you to have complicated and unique passwords. Or you might want a password manager. Again, the risk of that being compromised to me seems less than the risk of using a non-unique, repeatable, repeated password that is weak everywhere. Because we've seen with this, accounts can be compromised. You might not know about it for years. And so if you're using that password other places, that is like dominoes for your accounts. They are all opened up. So have a think about passwords, address passwords. There is a reason that we keep in this industry banging on about passwords. The other thing to do is set up two-factor authentication, and that acts like a double level of security in your accounts, and most people don't use it. It's not that complicated. Of course, it's not 100%, nothing is, but it will make you much more secure than not using it. Change your security answers for security questions, because these have been compromised, and if you've repeated them elsewhere, then you should change them, and you can lie on them. You don't have to give your actual mother's maiden name, because you can't change your mother's maiden name. If you give a fake one, you can change that. And finally, a lot of people use their email accounts like as if it's a filing system, and it shouldn't be used that way. It is best to clear out your inbox, clear out your sent items, save the information, back it up. If you're not using it, then it shouldn't really still be in there, because as we've seen with Yahoo, it could be vulnerable. So clearing it out means there's less information, less vulnerability. I hope that's been helpful. If you have anything you want to say, any questions, conversation, you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Jessica Barker, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.